In this video, you are going to learn how to create a theme effect in which your users can switch between the light mode and the dark mode on your browser. And when they refresh or leave your browser and come back, it will not go back to the default theme. So let's get started. Welcome back. I have my HTML, my CSS, and my JS file ready, and they are linked properly. So all you just have to do is to get started. So I'm going to have div, and I'm going to give it a class of count. Now I'm going to have an h1 tag that says toggle themes, then a button which is going to be triggering our effect. I'm going to give it a value of switch themes. Now I'm also going to give it an ID of toggle button, toggle button. So let's quickly have some quick styling. So in our CSS, I'm going to be creating some variables that we'll be able to access anywhere within our CSS code. Now in CSS, you can create variables once you just follow these rules. So the first thing, we're going to have root. So any variable we are creating under this root is a universal variable that we can access anywhere within our code. To create variable in CSS, you start with 2 hyphen. So 2 hyphen followed by the variable name. So the variable name I'm giving this is bg color, and it's going to take the background color of white. So now I'm also going to create another variable called text color, and I'll give it a color code of black. Now I'm going to head on to my body, that is the HTML body tag. Then background color, I'm going to call this variable. Now to call variable in CSS, you use the var. So I'm going to call this variable bg color. Then the text color, the color we are going to be using, I'm going to call the variable var, then text color. So now this is the default theme your users will be seeing on the browser. That is a white background. That is the light theme. Now we're also going to define a custom theme, which is the dark theme. So we're going to say body.dark theme. Now take note, there's no space between the body and the .dark theme. Now this line of code tells CSS to check our body tag. If the class name dark theme is present, it's going to apply the styles we are going to write here. Now if it checks and dark theme as a class is not present, it's not going to apply those styles. So we're also going to define a variable of bg color to be dark this time around, but it's a light shade of dark. So our text color this time around also, text color, a variable we are defining, since it's dark, it's going to take white. So we have this. So let's just go straight to our JavaScript. So I'm going to split it to the right, and as you can see, I already have some step-by-step process of how you can implement this. So the first thing we're going to do is to retrieve the button that will trigger the effect. Now to retrieve the button, I'm going to create a variable called const toggle button. And I'm going to call it document.getElement by ID. Now which element are we getting? We are getting this toggle button. So I'm going to have it here, toggle btn. Now after that, the next thing is to toggle the class name using an event listener. So now the goal or our idea here is to ensure that when users click on this button, they can switch between the light mode and the dark mode, and when they refresh or leave your browser, it remains at that when they come back. So we're going to be using an event listener on the toggle button. So toggle button dot add event listener, that is the click event listener, and we're going to write our styles here. So any styles we write here is going to take effect when they click on this button, switch themes. So now we're going to say document.body.classlist.toggle. Then we're going to give it dark theme. .toggle is a JavaScript inbuilt method that allows us to add or remove class name from a web element. So it checks the body. If the class name dark theme is present, it will remove it. But when it check and the class name dark theme is not present, it's going to add it. That's why we use .toggle. We're just adding and removing the class name dark theme if it is present or not. So the next thing is to store the user preference in its local storage. The local storage is a web API storage that allows developer to store data in a user browser. So we are going to check if document.body.classList.contains dark theme. So now we're going to check if the body tag has a class of dark theme. .contains just check if it is there. It does not add and it does not remove. So if it is there, we're going to set our local storage by saying local storage dot set item. Now we're going to create a variable called theme. We're going to create a variable called theme, and in this variable is going to contain a string value of dark theme. Note the class name that we are using is the same class name as we have used it in our CSS dark theme. So let's continue. Now if it is present, we're going to store this in the user local storage. Else, that is, if it is not present, we're going to say local storage dot set item, then the theme should be empty. So now before we move on with our code, let's check the current output of our code. So I'm going to copy the path and add on to my browser. So this was the one I worked on before. Then this is one we are currently working on, toggle theme. So when I click on switch theme, it changes color, and I'll see that the text color also changes. I'm switching between it, but when I refresh, it goes back to the default. So how can we now solve this problem? So let's head back to our code. So to be able to do that, we have to get the user preference from the local storage. So when the user is on the browser, what we're going to do, we're going to create a variable const current mode. That is to know maybe the user current preference is dark mode or light mode. So it's going to be equals to local storage. Now we're going to get the variable we created, local storage dot get item theme. Now we're going to say if current mode, that is if it is present, we're going to say document.body.classList.add. So if it is present, we are retrieving this string value here, dark theme. So we are going to add it as a class, dark theme. And else document.body.classList.add, we're going to add an empty string. So we're just checking if current mode, that is if theme is present, if it was saved in the local storage. We are now going to retrieve this variable we created, theme, and that variable contains a string called dark theme. So if it is present, that is if this line of code is true, we are going to add dark theme to the body. Else we are going to add an empty string. And remember, in our CSS, we've told it that if dark theme is present as a class in the body, you should apply these styles. So now let's go to our browser and check. So when I click on switch themes, see I switch between the themes, and when I refresh, it's not going back to the default. So let me close the browser and head on to the project and see if it will still retain the styles I chose. So you see it retained the theme that I chose, and when I refresh, it does not go back to the default theme. Don't just watch this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and also hit the notification bell. It is your own way of supporting me. And if you want to know how to create a stopwatch using JavaScript or how to build a login form, you can check out my video at the top. Thank you.